In this video, we are going to have a look at the Sigma 70mm f2.8 macro lens. Kia ora, good morning everyone, Richard here. Today we are going to have a look at another Sigma art lens. This one is the 70mm f2.8 macro lens. This Sigma 70mm f2.8 macro lens was released in 2018, but for some reason, there are not actually a lot of people talking about it. There are not that many reviews on the internet that talk about it, or even YouTube. There are only a very limited number of reviews that talk about it. And to be honest, the first time I heard about this lens was when the guys from Sigma told me about it and asked if I'm interested in having a play and do a review about this lens. So I don't really know the reason why, but it looks like a very interesting lens. So I said, yes, definitely I want to have a try. And I have been using this lens for almost a month now. So today I'm going to share with you what I found, what I like and don't like about this macro lens. So let's talk about the body design and the build quality first. So this Sigma 70mm f2.8 macro lens, the body design and the build quality is pretty typical Sigma art series lens quality. The build quality is very good. When you hold it in the hand, it feels very well made, very solid. But it is quite a bit lighter than the average Sigma art series lens, and I think this is probably the lightest Sigma art lens I have ever used, and the size of it is also quite small. Look at the front filter thread, it is only 49mm filter thread, which is a lot smaller than the typical 77 or even larger filter thread that you find on the other Sigma art lenses. The lens doesn't have any optical image stabilizer, and there are two switches on the side here. One is the autofocus manual focus switch, and the other one is a focus limiter. There are three different positions you can choose. One is the full range, one is from 0.5 meter to infinity, and the other one is from 0.5 meter to 0.258. So one is for macro, one is for far object, and one is like covered everything. Overall, there really isn't much I can complain about the build quality of the lens, but for some reason it does feel slightly more plasticky than the typical Sigma art lens. I'm not too sure the reason. I'm guessing maybe it's just because of the smaller size and smaller weight that make it feel a little bit more plasticky compared to the other normally pretty big and heavy Sigma art lenses. The autofocus speed is definitely quite a bit slower than the average lens. Even when I was using it with the Sony A7 III, the autofocus speed is still not very fast. For some reason, when I use the lens on the Nikon Z6 using the TechOut TZE01 adapter, the autofocus speed seems to be actually a little bit faster than when I was using it with the Sony A7 III. So I'm not too sure if it's an illusion or what, because I haven't really do the side-by-side using two cameras, but that's what I feel when I was switching between the two camera and using the same lens. When I was shooting macro photo in autofocus mode, I did find there were a few times that the autofocus would suddenly stop working. It just doesn't respond anymore, and that happened when I was using the Sony A7 III, and it happened even more regularly when I was using the Nikon Z6 using the TechOut adapter. It may not really be a big problem because most people, when you are shooting macro, you'll be shooting in manual focus mode anyway, but that's something I have experienced a few times in the last couple of weeks. Now we talk about manual focus, and there are a couple of things I want to talk about when using the lens in manual focus mode. Alright, first thing is that manual focus is done by wire, so it's not the pure mechanical one, which is not really a problem. But one thing I noticed is if you want to turn it from the infinity to the closest macro distance, you do have to turn quite a bit to do that. Instead of doing a typical, like say 270 degree, you have to turn many times before you reach the macro distance. And when you are changing the focus distance from infinity to closer focus distance, you see that the front part of the lens starting to extend. And when it does that, then you will notice you're starting to see there are actually quite a few scales on the mark on the barrel, the inside barrel that extended out. So that's something I really like because it tells you what is the current magnification ratio, and also what is the focus distance both in feet and meter. That is something that I really like. This kind of design was more popular in the older days. It's good to see that this 2018 lens also has some scale marking on the lens, which could be really handy sometimes. Okay, next let's talk about the image quality, and first let's look at the center sharpness. At f2.8 the lens is already very sharp with the 24 megapixel A7 III. Zoom in at 100%, the center sharpness is already excellent at f2.8, and when you stop down the center sharpness doesn't change much at all because the center sharpness was already excellent at f2.8. Corner at f2.8 is also very sharp, and when you stop down to f4 it gets slightly sharper, but the difference is really very small, and you're not really getting any more corner sharpness even if you stop down to f5.6 or beyond. Distortion wise, if you look at this sample photo, you can see there is very minimal amount of distortion, nothing you'll be worried about at all. Flare resistance is also very well controlled. Even when I'm directly shooting into the sun, I get minimal amount of flare or ghosting. And this is pretty much the same with all the other Sigma Art lens I have tested recently. Chromatic aberration is also fantastic. So even though Sigma doesn't call it an Apple lens, but there is very little amount of color fringing no matter what sort of high contrast photo I'm shooting. Even look at this photo of the black and white test chart, there is virtually no color fringing at all. In terms of vignetting at the maximum aperture 2.8, definitely there's some noticeable vignetting. Stop down to f4 would improve a bit, but you can still see a bit of vignetting near the corner of the frame. If you stop down to f5.6 now, then you don't really see much vignetting anymore. Bokeh from this Sigma lens is very beautiful. The transition from the bokeh to the background, it's very smooth. You don't really see much of those halo around the edge of the bokeh, and also you don't see any onion ring when you zoom in and check the photo at 100%. There is a little bit of cat's eye near the edges of the frame, especially when you are shooting at the maximum aperture, but it's not really crazy. When you start stopping down the lens, the bokeh still remains relatively round. Even at f11, the bokeh is still pretty round. So this is very good because when you are shooting macro photos, a lot of time you'll be stopping down the lens quite a lot to f11 or even smaller. So overall, I'm pretty happy with this Sigma Art 70mm macro lens. The build quality is typical Sigma Art series quality, which is very good. The image quality is excellent. Not only it's very sharp, the bokeh is very beautiful. Lens flare, chromatic aberration, distortion are all very well controlled. Vignetting is also not too serious at all. The only thing I can complain about this lens is that the autofocus speed is quite slow, so you definitely won't be using this lens to shoot any sports or fast action. But if you are using it to shoot macro photos or portrait photos, then this is definitely not a problem at all. Now, even though this is not the first 70mm macro lens from Sigma, normally most of the macro lenses are either a little bit shorter at around 55-60mm focal length, or it'll be quite a bit longer at around 90 to 100mm. So each of these two focal lengths have its own pros and cons, and quite often for people buying their first macro lens, it's quite a hard choice to choose whether I should go for this or that. Now with the 70mm, is pretty much right in the middle of these two focal lengths, so you can say this is a good middle ground between those two lenses. It is not too long and not too wide, so you can still use it as a little bit like a standard everyday lens, and at the same time, if you want to do a bit of portrait, the slightly longer focal length can also allow you to take some pretty nice portrait, especially with the very beautiful bokeh. And the way I see it is, if you have this lens and you can just pair it with a wide fast prime lens, so for example you can have a 28mm prime lens or 35mm prime lens. With these two lenses together, then they can be used to shoot a wide range of photos, from macro to portrait to landscape and everything in between. they can all be covered by this lens and a wide angle lens, and then you have a pretty compact and portable camera setup. So what do you guys think about this 70mm f2.8 macro lens from Sigma? Do you agree with me that this slightly unusual focal length is actually a very versatile focal length for a macro lens? Or you still have your special preference on what is the best focal length for a macro lens? Feel free to share with me your thoughts. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you in my next video.